Detective Tsukuchi Naomasa is a tall man with short black hair and rectangular black eyes. He wears his signature brown coat and matching hat. Underneath, he wears a black suit, a green tie, matching pants, and dress shoes. His expression was calm as he stepped out of his private vehicle. His gaze went to the sprawling crime scene that blocked off a large section of a street located in the heart of Hamamatsu. Several uniformed police officers and their cruisers stood as a barrier to prevent curious civilians from entering the area. His black eyes then focused on the large crater in the center of the road. Sansa, Tsukuchi said as he approached one of the officers standing near the crater with a small notepad. Lying still in the center was a white blanket covering a still body. What stood out most about this officer was the large cat head on his shoulders. "What do we have?" Sansa nodded her fluffy head and flipped through several pages on her notepad. At 7:30 to 7:46 p.m. tonight, a man named Uchida Ryota, the now deceased, fell from the sky and landed in this crater with several stab wounds around his torso. Pro Hero Edge Shot was the first on the scene and is currently on a 4-block search for any potential suspects. Some witnesses say he exploded out of that building and suddenly fell, Sansa said as she pointed at the building across the street. The building had a massive hole in its front wall on the 3rd floor. Debris and destruction could be seen pouring out of the opening. Any other casualties? How many were injured? Fortunately, there were no other fatalities in the incident. However, several of the people inside the building were injured when Uchida crashed into the building. They have been taken to Serei Hamamatsu General Hospital, Sansa said, much to Tsukuchi's relief. "Tell me more about Uchida Ryota," Tsukuchi said as he and Sansa walked away from the crater and towards the damaged building. "What was his quirk? Any criminal history?" Uchida's quirk is called Stone Constitution. His entire body is covered in a thick layer of stone that gave him a layer of defense, Sansa said as he and Tsukuchi were now standing on the 3rd floor, the detective examining the damage. The man also had a record. 3 assaults in the past 2 years, and he was arrested for robbing a convenience store 4 years ago. He even assaulted several officers when they tried to arrest him. "So, a repeat offender with a strong defensive quirk," Tsukuchi said as he turned his head to examine where the large judgment of destruction came from. "That doesn't explain how Uchida flew through this building and into the air. Does he have any ties to the Yakuza or any of the local gangs? We are currently investigating his background further, but so far, it does not appear to be gang-related." Tsukuchi hummed and exited the building through the side door. Sansa followed him as they entered an alley filled with officers and forensic investigators. There were several areas marked off with tape and small yellow cones. Tsukuchi removed his hat and knelt down next to a cone, his eyes focused on the 2 objects beside the cone. "Marbles?" Tsukuchi muttered with a raised eyebrow. Standing up, he turned to see some of the forensic team members collecting what looked like blood. But from the looks of their disappointed faces, the blood might not be viable due to it being mixed with the dirty water in the alley. "Looks like the fight started here and somehow ended up in the street," Sansa said as she looked at the damaged brick walls in the alley next to the several ruined trash bins. "A deal gone bad?" "Maybe," Tsukuchi said as he looked at the pile of ruined trash bins and boxes. Turning back, he saw the large hole in the building lined up where he stood. Whoever killed Uchida had enough power to send him through 3 floors of solid brick and steel. "Could it have been a vigilante?" Sansa asked as she looked straight through the building Uchida had crashed through from Tsukuchi's side. "That's what we're going to find out." Shimizu Soda POV. "Hey, an unknown roof." I blinked slowly in an attempt to remove the remnants of sleep from my eyes and turned my head to the side. That small action of mine caused a wave of excruciating pain to shoot through my body, causing me to clench my teeth to stop the incoming scream of agony. It was then that memories of my fight flooded to the forefront of my mind. Remembering the fact that I had killed a man with the use of Ryu. It didn't matter that I had done it in self-defense, it didn't change the fact that I had taken that man's life. I am a murderer. Easy there, kid. You shouldn't move around too much. Despite the unknown voice's warning, I quickly turned towards the direction the mysterious voice came from, causing another jolt of pain to shoot through me. Sitting in a chair several feet away was a fairly well-built man with blonde hair and gray-blue eyes with no eyebrows. He looked to be in his mid-20s or so, and had a large scar running across his forehead. There were visible traces of facial hair above his mouth and on the underside of his chin. The man's attire consisted of a blue-collared shirt over a white tank top and a standard pair of pants and boots. This guy looks familiar. Holy shit. My head is killing me. Who the hell are you? Where am I? What year is it? I grabbed my head to try to ease the pain as I asked the strange man several questions. Seeing my clearly distressed reaction, the man quickly stood up with his hands in front of him in a disarming manner. "Wow, kid. Easy. I'm friendly," the blond man said with a shaky smile. "I found you unconscious a block away. So I just, took you to my apartment and treated your wounds? Why do you say that as a question? Plus 20 SP. Despite the pain, I got up to sit on the small bed and looked down at my body. My entire upper body was covered in decently well-placed bandages and other first aid supplies. I tentatively touched my torso, where my precious organs were, and found no traces of scars. I still have my organs. That's a win in my book. The name is Jin. Like I said, you're in my apartment, and the year is 2394? Jin said with a confused look as he scratched his head. How do you feel? I'm not the best with first aid, and I wasn't sure if calling an ambulance was the right decision. After all, I don't know your situation. Jin? As in Bubabagawa, something Jin. It's twice. I see. Thanks for your help, Jin, I said as a sharp pain pulsed from my stomach. Plus 25 SP. Don't worry about it. I couldn't just leave a child lying on the street like that, Jin said as he walked towards his small kitchen. While he was gone, I took a quick look around. Beside me, I found my backpack containing my manuscript for my third book, Star Wars Episode 1. The apartment was fairly decent, with stains on the walls. There was minimal furniture and personal effects throughout the small apartment. In the corner were several empty bottles of beer or liquor gathered together. The air was rich with the scent of cigarettes, making my nose tingle. After a few seconds, Jin returned with a bottle of water. Thank you. I accepted the drink and took several thirsty sips, suddenly realizing how dry my throat was. When my thirst was quenched, I looked back at Jin and saw him looking awkward and unsure of where he was. His left hand was rubbing his head fiercely. How long was I gone? I think 2 days? Jin said as he resumed his original seat. I nodded and rubbed my face to help calm myself down. 2 days? Well, that's not good, I said as I looked down at my bed and then at the sheet and pillow on the floor several feet away. He gave up his bed for me. Despite knowing that Jin, or Twice, would one day be a villain who would be a part of the League of Villains, I couldn't help but sympathize with him after reading the original story. Although he did many bad things throughout the story, Jin was by no means evil. He was a character plagued by mental illness and loneliness. He was a person who genuinely cared for the few friends he had, and had proven himself to be trustworthy by his found family in the League of Villains. Only to one day be killed by someone he thought was his friend. On the other hand, I'm not very clean anymore. I killed a man. So, in terms of heinous actions so far, I'm probably worse than Jin. Unless there's something Horikoshi didn't share with the class's backstory. For a supposed future villain, instead of walking away and leaving my unconscious body wherever he found me, he decided to help me in my time of need. He was a real expert at that. Thanks, Jin. Really? I owe you one for helping me out, I said softly as I swung my legs off the bed. I ignored the pain and looked at the shocked man with a smile. Wouldn't you happen to have a phone? 30. Go ahead, Jin. Eat. Your food will get cold. Well, okay. Plus 10 SP. I smiled at the man and grabbed another handful of noodles with my chopsticks. On Jin's head was a hood, and the medical mask he had worn earlier was in his jacket pocket. I slurped my ramen hungrily and loudly, showing my appreciation for the chef's delicious food. Jin smelled the alluring aroma of his food and finally started eating. Immediately, a small smile grew on his face from the taste, and he immediately sank with hunger as well. The particular ramen stand we were at was relatively busy at this time of day. Despite the high traffic, the wait was worth it for a bowl of their delicious ramen. As one might imagine, not eating for 2 days had made me very hungry. So, after getting dressed in my now washed clothes, I invited Jin to join me for lunch as a thank you for helping me out. He tried to refuse initially, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. I was a persistent and persuasive guy. One look at his kitchen told me all I needed to know. The man didn't look like he had had a decent meal in a long time, so inviting him to dinner was the least I could do. After all, I had some decent money after selling my first book. Are you sure you don't have to rush home? Aren't your parents worried about you? I don't have any, so it's fine. Do you want some gyoza? My direct answer momentarily confused Jin, leaving him at a loss for words. Despite his silence, he looked at me with an expression of understanding. In the end, he simply nodded, and I placed an order for gyoza. Plus 15 SP. Although I wasn't too worried about the orphanage's reaction to my disappearance, I was more worried about how the Hatsums would react to my disappearance. My excuse to the orphanage director was that I had stayed at a friend's house and had completely missed telling them I would be gone for a few days. From his angry voice and overreaction, I could tell he was worried about me. How kind of him. Things got dicey when I called Minato. It was safe to say that the man bit me for leaving him in the dark for so long. I had given him the excuse that I had gotten into trouble at the orphanage, and I ended up grounded without phone privileges. I was lucky that I had woken up when I did because Minato told me that he was about to go to the orphanage, where I stayed to get answers. If that had happened, things would have gotten complicated. When Minato handed me the phone to talk to Mei, I couldn't give him an excuse before he called me a big idiot and hung up the phone. His reaction caught me off guard, and I was left perplexed, causing Jin to look at me in confusion while I looked at nothing like an idiot. You know, you didn't have to do this, Jin suddenly said as he placed some gyoza into his mouth. His face was down and hidden by his hood. His eyes stared deeply into his empty ramen bowl. His right hand was pressed against his head, and his left foot began to repeatedly tap the ground. I should be the one buying you food. You are a child after all. It's okay. Really? I waved off his concerns as I raised my arm to show off my now clean but slightly damaged hoodie. You gave me your bed and even washed my clothes, and you even treated my wounds. Buying some food for my new friend is no big deal. It's the least I can do. Sorry, Wallet, you're taking one for the team. Friend? Jin whispered as he slowly turned to me, his eyes wide and in disbelief. Me? Plus 25 SP. Well, yes, I said honestly. Despite the man's future knowledge, I wouldn't hold what he has yet to do against him. I could only judge him by what he's done. And what he'd done was help me during my time of need. Who knows what would have happened if someone else with far darker intentions had found me instead. In my opinion, Twice was a brother. Unless you think being friends with an 11-year-old is weird. If you do, I don't blame you. It's weird now that I think about it. Plus 50 SP. Are you sure? Jin looked at me, his eyes trembling and fearful. You want to be friends? With someone like me? Someone like you? I asked. Why not you? Because I'm, Jin whispered, each word causing her head to sink deeper and deeper. You're Jin, right? I interrupted, causing his head to turn. You're the guy who saved my ass. That makes you a hero in my eyes. So I don't see any problem with us being friends. Do you? Plus 100 SP. Jin's eyes widened and became wet at my words. His mouth opened and closed like a gaping fish. His mind struggled to come up with an answer. Ultimately, he gave me a small smile and a nod. Apparently he didn't trust his voice. Great. Now then, how about another order of gyoza? Sounds good. Another order of gyoza for me and my friend here. Plus 200 SP. I closed the door to my small room and threw my book bag onto my small bed. I gathered around my few belongings and sat down in my chair next to my small desk. Did I tell you my room was small? Because it is. After a few years of not being adopted, the room I had shared with 3 other children began to grow larger and larger as each of them was adopted. The caregivers and director looked at me with sympathy along with a hint of fear. Over time, my EQ began to make them uncomfortable around me. I didn't blame them, I practically radiated negativity. Anyway, they had decided to move me into a private room so I could have a little more privacy due to my unexpectedly extended stay at the orphanage. This more or less meant that they didn't expect me to be adopted, and were hiding me away so as not to scare away any prospective parents hoping to adopt the other children. Harsh, but understandable. At least I have my own room now, even if it was the size of a utility closet. I leaned back against my creaky old chair and slid in as its wooden back rested on my aching back. Man! I got my ass kicked. I lifted up my shirt and peeled off some of my bandages to see the huge purple bruise on my stomach. Ow! When I finally returned to the orphanage, I was greeted by a furious but surprisingly concerned director. The older woman must have asked me dozens of questions until she was finally satisfied. Fortunately, my ability to create excuses knew no bounds. Unfortunately, I ended up grounded for a month. I sat in my chair for several minutes, my expression thoughtful and frustrated as I rested my tired body. I almost died. I only managed to win through the desire to die. I should be happy to still be alive. Not many 11-year-olds could boast of having managed to beat a grown man. But then again, how many 11-year-olds have also killed someone? Knowing that, why am I so disappointed in myself? After having a couple of hours to think things over since the moment I woke up today, the fact that I had killed that man in the alley no longer bothered me as much as it used to. It was either him or me. And I chose me. I couldn't let that get me down. I wonder if there was something wrong with my head or if I was just crazy. What would have happened if I was with May? Would I have been able to protect her? I was barely able to protect myself, I whispered and felt an unreasonable surge of anger rise up in me. Despite being alive for 11 years, I've only had 2 people I considered friends, 3 when you count Jin. My first friend was Keiko, a sweet girl who was also orphaned by my side during the Iwata incident that took our parents away. She was now living happily with her new family in Musatafu. I was happy for her. My second friend, the zany but brilliant May. If you looked past her crazy and obsessive behavior towards her inventions, she was actually quite fun to be around. Making her dig a place in my heart despite my initial intentions of using her as a point farm. I had tried to make more friends in high school to alleviate the loneliness I felt, but having a constant stream of negative energy coming out of me made it a challenging task. Add in my quirkless status, and my ability to make friends takes a turn for the worse. So not much luck there. So the thought of Keiko or May, the few friends I had, getting hurt or dying because I didn't have the strength to defeat anyone who wanted to hurt them made me angry. Angry at myself for being so weak. That fight was a wake-up call. I see it now. I didn't win because I was strong. I won because I was lucky. I muttered and summoned my gacha system. The floating gacha machine pulsed with energy as the plastic prizes inside glowed with energy. Looking at the floating screen beside the machine, I saw that I had accumulated 5,100 SP to spend. It's time for me to change that. I can't let what happened 2 days ago happen again. I need strength. I need to get stronger. I have to become the strongest. An image of Gojo and Sukuna flashed in my mind. I walked over and turned the dial on the gacha machine while using 1,500 SP. I waited and listened as the prizes danced around in the machine until one of them popped out of the lid. The diamond level reward pull only had a 35% chance of pulling out a reward that would fit the point cost. Meaning my chances of getting a legendary reward were low. However, the bright blue glow of the prize erased any doubt that this was a fraud. Grabbing the prize ball, I opened the lid and smiled. The question: can people in the MHA world see the MC's abilities? Answer: more or less. No, MHA people can't see pure cursed energy, cursed spirits, or Shikigami. With one exception, I'll explain why when I get to that point. But at the same time, yes. They can see physical attacks created by cursed energy. Examples are fire, ice, water, or any natural or elemental constructs or attacks. Mahito's transfigured humans could also be seen because they were originally humans. Domain expansions can also be seen. Additionally, beams of cursed energy can also be seen, such as Ishikori Ryu's granite explosion. Because it's too cool not to be. I don't know about this, May. It's okay, it's okay. You're built differently. I'm sure you can handle the setback. You said there wasn't going to be any backlash. You must have heard wrong. Plus 5 SP. I narrowed my eyes at May as she finished adjusting the pair of mechanical arms onto my body. I growled as she tightened one of the straps really tightly around my bicep with a sweet smile on her face. That hurts a little. Oh, right? I'm sure it's fine. Plus 5 SP. Ever since I came back to work after my month off, May has been acting weirder than usual. By weirder, I meant she's been treating me a lot more roughly than before. This made sense. She wasn't very subtle about hiding the fact that she was angry with me for leaving her alone for weeks. I had underestimated how much she had come to care about me, which was strange in itself, knowing her character. On the other hand, I had given up expecting the world around me to remain the same as in the anime/manga. The people around me were very real with human emotions. Not characters behind a screen or an ink on paper. When I walked into the shop on my first day back, May seemed extremely happy for a split second before her happiness melted into a blank smile. Her eyes stared at me with a silent message of future retribution. But when it came to May, that meant I would end up being her guinea pig for the various babies she had made in my absence. All Minato said to me was, "Good luck," and walked out of the window. What a traitor. So for the next 2 weeks, I was put through the ringer, baby after baby in the hopes that she would eventually forgive me. Sure, her anger was a little absurd, but she was 10. So she got a pass. Okay, remember to undo the safety mechanism. We don't want a repeat of yesterday, May said as she took several steps back and stood behind an old rusty car for cover. We were outside behind the shop where Minato stored a lot of his junk and large mechanical parts that took up too much space inside. There were also a few cars lined up outside that he worked on in his spare time. The car Mei was using as a shield was an old 2015 Toyota that Minato gave her to use as she pleased. I rolled my eyes and did as she told me. I grabbed the little switch on the top of the left forearm armor and flipped it, turning off the safety. I moved my arms up, down, left, and right to test their mobility. They were a little hard to move, and the arms would lock up at times, but it was a lot better than the Mk3 from a few days ago. So that was a win. Alright, let's see what these can do, I whispered and walked over to a large punching bag made of steel, courtesy of Minato. I slid into a loose stance and leveled my gaze on the steel bag. I listened to the internal mechanisms in the arms and waited. Whistle. Wham! A small dent appeared in the steel bag from my right punch. I slid back and spun to land a left hook strike into the side of the bag, leaving a more significant dent than before. I stopped and looked down at the knuckles on my arm cuffs and saw several cracks and indentations from my punches. Okay, that's it. Any more than that, and they'll break, Mei, I said as I looked back to see Mei running out from behind her blanket, a big smile on her face. +8 SP. Hee hee. Amazing. Amazing. Mei swept her hands across the steel bag to feel the dents I caused. Well, her mechanical arms caused. What an improvement. She then turned to me and grabbed the sides of my arms to inspect the damage. I see. Looks like the shock absorption for the arms needs work. How do you feel? My hands feel a little stiff, but they're not in any pain, I said as I turned on the safety switch to have Mei begin removing her arms. However, her elbows kept locking between hits. Unfortunately, this is the fastest I can do them right now, Mei said as she completely removed the right mechanical arm and placed it on a nearby table before moving to the left. At least, if we want to avoid breaking your bones, I can improve the internal power regulators to avoid the charging time between hits. Ah, yes. Please do. I like my bones not to be broken. Yes, yes. I'll be sure to keep that in mind. Mei smiled as she placed the fully retracted left mechanical arm onto the workbench. He then grabbed my hands in his as his thumb swept over my red knuckles. The darker color in his yellow eyes grew slightly as he looked closely at my skin. They're a little swollen. Are you sure you're not in any pain? Yeah, they're fine. Just make sure to increase the padding inside the gloves, I said as she let me go in favor of writing several notes on her clipboard. I will do that. +10 SP. I smiled at her as she continued to write and draw all of her ideas. It was quite fascinating to watch her work. It's still hard to believe that she's capable of such incredible inventories at such a young age. I moved my head towards the steel punching bag to see the small dents that the mechanical arms created. Then again, he'll eventually create a support team advanced enough to handle Midoriya using 10 to 20% of one for all after all. No, things like these power arms are just the beginning. You're amazing, Mei, I said without looking at her. She paused in her writing and rambled to look at me in confusion. These arms of yours are just the beginning. I know that one day, your babies will change the world. I'm sure of it. +15 SP. Of course they will. What a way to state the obvious, Soda. Just you wait. My name will be known throughout the world, Mei said with a big proud smile on her face as she puffed out her chest. +30 SP. I laughed at her selfish attitude, but I didn't disagree. Having an unorthodox mindset and a strong sense of self will only serve to push her to new limits. A fact that pushed Jujutsu sorcerers like Gojo and Sukuna to the top of the Jujutsu world. I have to be like Mei. I have to work hard if I want to be among the strongest in this world. That fight a month ago has shown me that I can't continue living my life the way I did before. If I do, I'll be killed by guys like Shigaraki, All for One, Overhaul, the Nomu, and many other strong people. I looked down at my hand and clenched it into a tight fist. I have to get stronger. For that, I need more combat experience to improve my understanding of Jujutsu. I can't rely on the inherent knowledge of how to use my curse techniques. Knowledge is not mastery. I need to push beyond and reach the heights of Gojo or Sukuna. No. I have to surpass them. And with the power of this gacha system, I can reach levels far beyond and surpass them. Suddenly, a drop of water fell onto my clenched fist. I blinked and looked up at the sky to see dark gray clouds and rumbling noises. Mei also looked up and quickly squeezed in to grab her mechanical arms. Ah! It's going to rain. Baby number 12 isn't waterproof. Soda, help. 3 months later. The rainy city at night was a spectacle of bright streets and sparkling reflections. The glow of the streetlights created a soft ambience, casting a warm halo around the rain-soaked pavement. The sounds of raindrops hitting the roofs around me and splashing onto the ground filled the air, creating a soothing symphony. The city lights dance in the puddles, creating a mesmerizing mosaic of colors. The reflections of neon signs and traffic lights add an otherworldly quality to the cityscape, turning the city into an ethereal, dreamlike place. Despite the wet sidewalks and foggy air, there is a certain beauty and tranquility that comes with a rainy night in the city. But what was most striking to those paying attention to the rooftops of the surrounding buildings were the dozens of crows perched looking down on the streets. They watched the passing citizens with an eerie, razor-sharp focus. I looked out over the city of Hamamatsu with a fixed gaze. A black hood sat over my head to protect me from the non-stop rain as I knelt on the edge of one of the rooftops near the city's financial center. Under my black jacket was a white, long-sleeved shirt with a high collar. Below my waist were black jeans and sneakers, while a sheathed katana sat on my left hip. Sitting inside a black Kevlar sash strapped to my back was a short but wide-edged combat knife with a black leather guard. I pulled Slaughter Demon from its sheath and held it against the black raven standing on my shoulder. Its head twitched as if to nod at my silent command, and it grabbed the blade between its feet. Once it was secured, the raven leapt up and flew away. Nodding, I stood up and used my CE to help me jump from rooftop to rooftop towards my new destination. After traveling for a few city blocks, I stopped at the edge of a rooftop belonging to an old warehouse. My attention was drawn to the scene below. "Where are you headed?" a voice said with amusement, cutting through the pitter-patter of the rain. "Come on, honey, we just want to chat." "Leave me alone," a female voice shouted. Down below, on the dark streets of the city, a woman dressed in an outfit fit for a stewardess walked at full speed through the dimly lit alleys. Her dark brown hair was wet, and so was her slightly revealing clothing, causing it to cling to her curvaceous body. Following behind the clearly fearful woman was a small group of men. They walked behind her with amused smiles on their faces as they ignored the torrential rain drenching them. 2 of the 5 men had mutant features due to their quirks. One of the mutated men had 4 arms and red skin, while the other man had a large head and small limbs with yellow skin. The other 3 men had normal features, their quirks most likely being of the emitter type. I watched the woman from the rooftops as she continued to try to escape her pursuers and enter and exit various streets. But no matter what she did, the group of men continued to follow her. This went on for a while longer before the woman reached an unexpected dead end at the end of a long, dirty alley, her face lit up with fear and dread. "Oh, no," the woman said, quickly turning to try and leave, but was soon stopped by her pursuers, who were creating a wall with their bodies. "Gee, go away. Or I'll call the police." "Please, you probably don't have a phone. If you did, then you would have called them already," one of the men said. He had dirty blonde hair and green eyes. "You're not calling anyone, sweetie." Then I'll scream." "I wouldn't." The last one who did that had her tongue ripped out. The red-skinned, 4-armed man said with a smile, making the woman's face turn pale. "Yeah, so shut your mouth," the man with a big head and yellow skin shouted. This made the last 2 plain-looking members of his group laugh. "Oh, boss. Isn't she a beauty?" said one of the simple men. His tongue slowly slid across his lips. "Much prettier than last night." His comment caused the woman to start shaking in fear, her legs slowly moving back until her back hit the cold brick wall. Her arms slowly rose to wrap around herself. 5-1. "I like those odds," I muttered. I used CE to strengthen my legs and jumped off the roof I had stood on and fell. A surprisingly soft crash shook the wet floor as I touched down in a puddle between the man and the woman, sending water everywhere. I stood up and shoved my hands into my jacket pocket. Several moments of silence hung in the air as I stared at them coldly from the darkness of my neighborhood. "Whose shrimp is it?" "Just for that, I'm kicking your ass first." I pointed my finger at the man with 4 arms and red skin. 5/6 equals plus 30 SP. 4 arms looked dumbfounded for several seconds before he started laughing out loud. His 4 cronies soon joined in the laughter as they all looked at me in amusement. Blood manipulation. It's just a kid playing hero. Listen here, kid. Get out of here before we. Flowing red scale. Before anyone could react, I lunged straight at the 4-armed man and sent my blood-covered fist straight into his stomach, causing the man to double over in pain, his face twisted in agony. The man's entourage seemed so shocked by my sudden burst of speed and power that they stood frozen. The woman behind me stared at my back with wide eyes, clearly shocked by my display of power despite my size. I leaned close to the red-skinned man's right ear, a mask made of cracked blood now over my eyes, and whispered. I told you, didn't I? You're going to fall first. +5 SP. Blood manipulation, flowing red scale. It is a technique that increases the user's body temperature, pulse rate, and red blood cell count. This results in a significant increase in energy and physical abilities, allowing the user to perform superhuman feats such as increased strength, speed, and agility. The enhanced strength and speed granted can be used to increase the user's capabilities in hand-to-hand combat, making a knowledgeable fighter a force to be reckoned with. Jumping to the side, I was able to easily dodge the red-skinned man's pair of well-muscled arms. He growled in anger and struck me again, but once again he hit nothing but air as he took a step back. His eyes twitched at the fact that he was too slow and uncoordinated to hit me. His red skin glowed in the dim light, a stark contrast to his black, tattered clothing. +8 SP. GRR. Help me, you idiots. The four-armed man roared at his crew, jolting them all into action. All right. We've got your back, boss. TCH. This is not a child. He's too fast and strong. I rolled my eyes from beneath the darkness of my hood and raised my arms in front of me in a loose boxer stance. The four-armed man held his stomach and sat back to see three of his crew running towards me with the big-headed man hanging back. He looked down at his stomach and saw a dark red stain that slowly disappeared, causing him great confusion. You'll regret this, you bastard. One of the plain-looking men pulled back his arm and threw a careless punch at my head. His teeth are all different colors. I watched and parried his punch to the side, causing the man to stumble. I jumped up and slammed my elbow into the side of his head, sending him to the ground, unconscious. Ha, they're all yellow now. His emotions must be the reason his teeth are changing color. What a silly quirk. +8 SP. Nishi. Normal man number 2 shouted as he and normal man number 3 glared at their friend. Then, the two of them charged at me, their faces twisted in rage. You'll pay for that. Despite their larger size and numbers, I was able to weave in and out of their punches and kicks with ease. These two men were untrained and relied heavily on their numbers to overpower me. Someone with decent training could keep up with them, thanks to how they telegraphed each swing or punch. The man to my left seemed to have a quirk that gave him super long nails on command, and the one to my right apparently had a quirk that gave him extra joints in his skeleton. Their pathetic quirks didn't even offer them any benefits or attack power. Unfortunately, they were faced with someone amplified by flowing red scale and Itadori Yuji's hand-to-hand combat skills. Mr. Left-Right Goodnight himself. Blam. Crack. +10 SP. The two men fell to the ground like bags of bricks from my quick and well-placed punches and kicks to their heads. I looked at my three knocked-out opponents in disappointment. Are you done hiding behind your lackeys? I said to the four-armed man. The one with the big head and yellow skin shook in annoyance from where he stood. How pathetic. +5 SP. Take this. Power wave. The man with the big head sent his right hand towards me. His hand was covered in a golden hue of energy, and his palm was pointing in my direction. In the blink of an eye, a large burst of concentrated energy flew straight towards me, causing my eyes to widen. Shit. There's no time to dodge. I raised my arms in front of me and focused my CE throughout my body to reinforce myself. The blast of energy hit my body and sent me skidding several feet backwards. I dug my feet into the ground and immediately began to slow down. I slid to a stop beside the woman at the end of the cul-de-sac. She looked at me with concern and a slight tremor as she dropped her arms to my side. I ignored her in favor of analyzing the large-headed man's peculiarity. Before unleashing that attack, he was holding his arm behind his back to hide what he was doing. In fact, he was doing that during my fight with the three fools. That means his attack needs to be charged before he can use it. Therefore, are you okay? Stay silent. Silence, seductive lady. I'm thinking. +5 SP. The curvy woman flinched at my quick, rude comment. I paid it no mind and stepped forward to begin walking towards my last two opponents, causing the nervous, yellow-skinned man to shift. It seemed like he didn't expect me to be able to stop his attack. Immediately, he pulled his arm behind himself to charge another attack. As if I'd leave it to you. What do you think this is? Dragon Ball? I blasted towards the big-headed man, causing him to flinch and break his concentration momentarily. Just as I was about to reach the bobblehead, Four Arms decided it was time to get back into the fight. Four Arms snarled and used both of his right arms in an attempt to slam my head through the wall behind me, only to fail as I wove under his attack. Using a quick step back, I created some space between myself and the large mutant. He then stepped in front of his big-headed companion and switched into a Muay Thai stance. "Damn it, you! Who are you?" Forearms growled. Instead of answering, I ran towards the red-skinned man and delivered a CE-enhanced right punch which he promptly blocked. I tilted my head to the side and felt the wind of his left jab slash next to my ear. Using my short stature, I entered his personal space and landed a hook punch to my opponent's liver. Forearms gritted his teeth in pain and was about to crush his upper arms against my head when an invisible force slammed into his liver again, throwing him off balance. "Divergent fist," I muttered as I ran. Leaping into the air, I landed 3 quick kicks to my opponent's head, chest, and stomach. Thanks to my divergent fist, each attack had a delayed second impact. Forearms spun wildly in the air from my attack and fell into a puddle below. As his body crashed to the ground, a large, victorious grin grew on his face. I felt the hairs on my body stand up, and I quickly looked at Mr. Bobblehead. Wave of power. Shit, so much for limiting yourself to just blood manipulation. Just as the yellow energy wave was about to crash into me, I held my palm towards the ground and fired a concentrated burst of flames that illuminated everything in the dead end. I felt my body violently move upwards as I moved away from Mr. Bobblehead's attack. Fire? Mr. Bobblehead shrieked at the sight of his attack. +8 SP. I landed on the ground with ease and looked up to see Forearms now at his feet. A look of apprehension and nervousness on his face. Behind him, Mr. Bobblehead was shaking like a leaf. "Those flames. They're not like endeavors," Mr. Bobblehead muttered, his face covered in rain and sweat. Forearms growled and began to run at full speed towards me. "Don't be ridiculous. This punk has a fire quirk. Hurry up and recharge." "I don't believe it." I held my hands out and slid them to the side. Forearms suddenly whipped out to the side and flew straight towards Mr. Bobblehead. The 2 men rolled across the ground in a heap of flailing limbs. My body," Forearms muttered as he trembled. "It hurts." "Tajima-san. What's wrong?" Mr. Bobblehead asked Forearms, Tajima, as he watched the 4-armed man tremble uncontrollably on the ground. Blood began to pour out of Tajima's mouth and eyes as he convulsed on the ground. "Much nicer than last night," I said as I continued to point my hand at Tajima, repeating what one of the simple men said earlier. "That's what your friend said, right?" Slowly, I clenched my hand tighter and tighter, but not to the point of curling my fingers into a fist. My action made Tajima hug his stomach tightly as he screamed like crazy. "You see, I don't particularly like people like you guys. Rapists and the like. So I'll do the world a favor and get rid of you 5. Okay?" For a moment, I hesitated on what I was about to do next. I looked behind me at the frightened woman and imagined what could have happened to her if I had not decided to go on my crusade to become stronger. She could have been raped, beaten, or even killed by these rabid dogs. I took a deep breath and formed my resolve. At the same time, unknown to me, a piece of my humanity withered away inside me. Blood manipulation, human pincushion. Human pincushion was the first original technique I created with my blood manipulation curse technique. It requires me to inject my own blood into my opponent's bloodstream, imbued with a layer of CE. The CE layer protects my blood from being tricked or absorbed into my opponent's body, meaning it will lie in wait until I catch up with it and command it to do whatever I wish. Whether that be to restrict its movements or shred its insides to pieces. To finish the technique, I command my blood to expand exponentially like a short-range grenade-like explosion, sending long spikes of blood all over my target's body. Once I shouted the name of my original first technique, I clenched my fist and spikes of my blood shot out of Tajima's body, making him look like a bloody pin. His face was twisted in agony until he finally relaxed. Blood slowly trickled down from his body, mixing with the large pool of dirty water beneath him. +30 SP. +15 SP. +12 SP. Og. Why you killed him? Mr. Bobblehead screamed as he quickly stood up and started to run away. Leave me alone. As he ran, he saw a crow standing alone at the end of the long alley. But what confused him the most was the combat knife beneath its tiny paws. The little bird squawked and quickly flew away. Funny. That's what she said too, I said as I gestured to the woman behind me, who was now on the ground on her knees. Her face was etched in shock and horror at my actions. +8 SP. I ignored the woman and raised my hands. Applause. I suddenly appeared where the fallen combat knife once sat, causing Mr. Bobblehead's eyes to widen and his mouth to drop open in horror. I held my right fist in my left hand as I charged my CE. Due to the shape of his body and the size of his head, Mr. Bobblehead was unable to slow down and stop his run, causing him to stumble right in front of me. Wham! My punch found its mark, as it broke Mr. Bobblehead's nose and sent him crashing backwards a dozen feet. His broken nose sprayed blood all over the dirty, wet ground. Once he rolled to a stop, his body twitched a few times until he was unconscious. Plus 15 SP. Fuck it. I looked down at my bloodied and bruised right fist with a frown. I thought I would have gotten it that time, for sure. I have been trying to achieve a black flash for the past 2 months, and so far, I have failed to achieve a single one. I needed to achieve it to further boost my understanding of the essence of cursed energy. But so far, no luck. I sighed in frustration and walked down the alley, passing the 4 knocked out men and a corpse as I did so. Reaching my newly acquired weapon, Slaughter Demon, I crouched down and slid it back into its holster. Standing there, I noticed the woman I inadvertently saved looking at me with a foolish expression. "Why are you still here?" I asked the frozen woman. My voice brought her out of her daze, causing her head to turn towards me in fear. "Get out of here now." Plus 5 SP. I don't," the woman said shakily before standing up. At first, she took small, unsteady steps, her eyes scanning all the fallen men and corpses before turning back to me. She looked scared, but somehow relieved at the same time. Without another word, she ran out of the alley and disappeared around the corner. I looked up at the rooftops where 3 crows were perched. Their eyes were looking at me with loyalty. "Follow her. Make sure she gets home," I called, causing one of the crows to squawk. Ghetto, will make sure that the human, gets to his nest." I nodded at the crow I named Ghetto as it flapped its wings and flew away. I scratched the back of my head as I still couldn't get over the fact that I was now able to understand what the crows under my command were saying. It was a strange experience. Being able to talk to my crows wasn't something I thought my recently thrown away curse technique, blackbird manipulation, could also do. Don't even ask me how they got their eponymous personalities. Was Mei also able to understand her birds? If so, it's a fact that Gege hid from all of us. How dare he? Staying here has gotten boring, so I'll be leaving. Maybe I'll even fly against a hawk to fight? Hey, it won't even be a fight. I'll just take him down quickly. I am the strongest, after all, Gojo the crow said as he followed Ghetto the crow. The crow next to Gojo, Shoko, shook her head before looking at me from her perch. "Ha! I'll make sure they don't get distracted, master." "Correct, you do that." Shoko nodded her little head and flew away. I watched them all fly away and turned back to the unconscious men on the ground. With a heavy heart, I raised my hand and summoned a fireball. Let's clean up this mess. Jumping from one roof to another at night like a parkour ninja was quite fun. Due to the size of the country, almost all living complexes, such as apartments or houses, had to be built quite close to each other to save space. This also applied to metropolitan areas of cities where all buildings and skyscrapers were practically glued to each other to save space. Yes, there were some areas in the country where there were more widely spaced buildings like those made for the government or private organizations, but those were not as common for running. Because of that, traveling from rooftop to rooftop on foot was pretty easy since you don't have to jump long distances to get to the other side, making traveling even easier. I should start going home now. I jumped into the air using my CE and felt the cool night air brush past my face. It felt nice and refreshing. 3 months. It has been 3 months since I embarked on my quest to master Jujutsu. This journey has led me to engage in nightly skirmishes with the less savory elements of our heroic society. The city is filled with criminals and scoundrels, outnumbering the heroes 3 to 1. Now, some of you might be wondering why an 11-year-old, now 12-year-old, would go around fighting with adults. The answer is simple: because of experience. My path to mastering Jujutsu sorcery and my curse techniques is not an easy one. I have meticulously planned out my physical training, making sure that my new, more strenuous routine does not impede my growth. Rushing would be counterproductive. It would do me no good to hinder my development just to become a little stronger than before. I still had time, so there was no need to rush. After all, I didn't want to risk being short. Anyway, back to what I was talking about. My reasoning for why I was getting into fights was to increase my fighting experience and understanding of Jujutsu sorcery. My goal was to get to the point of understanding Jujutsu like Sukuna himself while having the battle IQ of Gojo himself. My goals may seem lofty, even unattainable to most canonical Jujutsu sorcerers. But I am not most sorcerers. I am different. I was him. I was that guy. Or at least, it would be soon. I blinked out of my thoughts and landed in an abandoned alley a block or two away from my orphanage to change. I slipped into my Jujutsu uniform and put on a black hoodie and blue jeans. Now changed, I stepped out onto the sidewalk and began walking home. Yeah, just a 12-year-old boy walking alone at 2 a.m. Now then, where was I? I had a trick, or as some would call it, a golden finger, that could give me all the curse techniques known in the original series without the recoil, making my potential even more significant than that of the potential man himself. It wouldn't be far-fetched to say that I could one day become an untouchable god. Imagine the raw power someone with the 6 eyes, Sukuna, Limitless, the 10 shadows, Shrine, and Star Rage's cursed energy reserves could do. It was both terrifying and exciting to think about. Some of you may have noticed that I only listed 4 techniques. There is a reason for that. Unfortunately, I made a disappointing discovery when I unlocked my 5th curse technique. I was only able to use 4 techniques within 2 hours of each other. Let's put this in video game terms. Let's say my body has 4 magic slots that I could assign a single curse technique to. If I wanted to change one of the techniques, I had to wait 2 hours for one of the slots to cool down in order to change the technique to a different one. Out of curiosity, I pushed myself to use 5 techniques at once, but I didn't like having blood flowing from my eyes, nose, ears, and mouth while the most horrible headache tried to melt my brain. It's safe to say I'm sticking to 4 curse techniques until I can safely handle more. Despite that slight setback, it wouldn't do me any good to imagine what I might one day do until I actually got those techniques and passives out of the gacha system. So far, I haven't used any of the techniques mentioned above yet. But I have managed to pick up some other great techniques so far. Now he had Jogo's fire manipulation, Yorozu's construction, Meimei's black bird manipulation, and finally, Gota Toshio's cloning. Who was Gota Toshio? That was the name of Mr. Bagman from the Hidden Inventory arc in JJK. I wanted to spell one thing right now: Jogo's fire manipulation and Yorozu build did not make me op. At least, not yet. No, Jogo was said to be on par with around 8 or 9 of Sukuna's fingers, making him an incredibly powerful curse spirit. Hell, his fight with Sukuna himself in Shibuya was the perfect example of what one with such a technique could do. However, Jogo was a special grade curse spirit with a lot of curse energy. I, on the other hand, have the reserves of a grade 1 sorcerer. Which means I had no hopes of pulling off any crazy, over-the-top moves that could melt an entire city block. Moving on to the Yorozu building technique. It was by far one of the most impressive and diverse techniques in the curse technique catalog. The technique itself allows me to recreate any substance I recognize with CE, with the exception of special curse tools. In other words, I could bring to life anything I could imagine. The limitless number of possibilities was enough to make me laugh like crazy. Which I did when I initially pulled out the diamond pull technique, which happened to be at school. They looked at me like I was a crazy person for a whole week after that. The technique had one restriction, which was that it did not recreate special curse tools. That aspect of the technique was a bit disappointing. My plans to create a small armory for my 2 tools went out the window. Said 2 tools were Kusakabe's katana and Slaughter Demon. 2 weapons that went well with Maki's weapon mastery skill, which I also took out a while back. Back to the technique, creating something out of nothing uses a lot of cursed energy, making this technique extremely energy inefficient compared to other curse techniques. However, due to my relatively good reserves and low understanding of Jujutsu, the most I could create before exhausting myself for an entire day were small and medium-sized items. This was quite sad and disappointing. Not being able to become a great hitter straight away was annoying, but there was nothing I could do. I had to keep training so that I could one day use these techniques to their full potential. This brings us back to my last 2 techniques. Manipulation and cloning of black bird. As the name suggests, black bird manipulation allows the user to imbue crows with CE and control them at will. The user can manipulate multiple crows at the same time from an extended range away from themselves. Furthermore, the user can also share vision with birds, making the technique perfect for surveillance. It also makes crows, under the user's command, absolutely obedient, so they can also be used offensively, even at the cost of the bird's own life. That move was something I never found myself using unless it was life or death. This was mainly due to the mistake I made when I started naming my crows after various JJK characters and the added ability to understand what they were saying. It would be cruel and heartless of me to use them like Meimei did as suicide bombers. I used this particular technique to go around the city to find any seedy places with people to beat up, criminals to stop. It also helped me avoid heroes and police patrolling. A convenient technique, indeed. I arrived outside the west building of the orphanage and began to sneak up to the window of the storage room, otherwise known as my room, using precise movements and stealth. As I sneaked away, I thought about my latest acquired technique. Cloning. This technique allows the user to clone themselves using a sort of liquid mud-like material manipulated with their CE. The user can produce up to 4 clones for a total of 5 bodies. Using the cloned bodies, the user can instantly switch their true self with a clone at any time, sort of like Boogie Woogie, but without the clapping. Each clone can be considered exactly identical to the original caster, with the exception of the clones knowing they're clones. Which was a relief when I found out that little detail. I didn't want a twice situation to happen. I haven't had many opportunities to use this skill in combat yet. If anything, I wanted to save this technique as my trump card for a rainy day. You never know when you might need a get-out-of-jail-free card. So, instead of using it in the field, I decided to use my clones for a more productive and lucrative reason. Page 7 is done. I'm ready for the next one. I got it. Here are pages 8 and 9. Dude, there's a typo in chapter 21. Oh yeah? Then fix it. I used them to write my books and manga. Entering my room, I closed the door behind me and congratulated myself on another successful infiltration. The sight of 4 more perfect copies of myself greeted me as everyone was hard at work on their tasks. Seeing my arrival, everyone paused and turned to me. Ah, the boss is back. Welcome back, boss. Hey, you have some blood on your shoe. You smell like failure. Isn't there Black Flash tonight either? I could do without the personalities these guys have. I rolled my eyes at their comments and flopped down on my little bed. They didn't care about my dismissal and went to work. Each of my copies were wearing different colored shirts to better separate themselves as they all slaved away. 2 of my copies were typing away on Hunger Games books 2 and 3 on their new laptops, while the other 2 were drawing up a storm for next week's chapter of my new serialized manga. What was so great about these clones, besides their snide comments and the fact that my tiny room was now even smaller thanks to their bodies and all the art supplies and notebooks, was the fact that they didn't get tired or have any human needs. This technique really came in handy, considering I still needed to make money while I was training to become the strongest, meaning I could have them work on all my current and future books and manga series nonstop. A perfect, productive sweatshop. Hey, boss. Our editor called while you were gone. Clone Green said as he stopped drawing. Clone Yellow nodded and focused on the page in front of him. I turned to CG with tired eyes and nodded, making him continue. She says she wants to meet you and she won't take no for an answer again. TCH. That woman is persistent. I muttered as I rubbed my face. Fine. I'll call her tomorrow to set up a meeting. As long as I can get her off my back. One meeting shouldn't hurt. CG nodded and picked up his pencil to continue drawing. I sighed and looked up at the ceiling. The exhaustion from today's pranks and training is catching up to me. Slowly, my eyelids began to droop more and more before sleep consumed me. Hey, boss. Brush your teeth. Fact sheet. Sota Shimizu. Curse techniques. Boogie Woogie, all owie. Blood manipulation, Koso. Beast summons, Ino Takuma. Fire manipulation, Game. Construction, Yorozu. Blackbird handling, Mei Mei. Cloning, Bagman. Skills. Yuji's hand-to-hand combat skills. Yuta's sword skills. Maki's weapon specialist skills. Skills/passives. Nanami EC reserves. Arms. Kujisaki Nabra's hammer. Demon of Massacre. Katana of Kusakabe Atsuya. On my way, man. I can't believe it ended on such a cliffhanger. A young high school student with 4 eyes and big ears said with an excited smile as he closed this week's issue of Jump. I know, right? Now we have to wait another week to see if Raphael can survive his fight against Kurai. A blue-skinned boy with fish scales all over his body said in frustration. In his hands was another copy of the newest Jump. Hey, at least we can read Gege-sensei's other works while we wait. What chapter are you on anyway? I'm on chapter 18. Let me tell you, man, things are getting intense. The boy with the fish scales said as he pulled out a copy of the Hunger Games. Hee, my reach has grown to this point. I smiled as my classmates continued to talk about my book from my spot at the back of the classroom. It was currently lunchtime, and everyone was separated into their own little groups, enjoying their meal together. However, I sat alone. Just me and my small box lunch that included rice, grilled fish, vegetables, and some miso soup. All I needed was my lunch for the company. Who needed friends while eating delicious miso soup? As I ate, I looked over at the table where the chatting students were talking and saw a picture of 4 turtle brothers on the front cover alongside the rest of the main characters from the stories included. It shouldn't be hard to guess which famous story I brought to life in shonen manga form. It was none other than the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I'm in a world where stories like Dragon Ball Z, Naruto, Bleach, One Piece, and several other famous works don't exist. But I chose to start with the story of the 4 turtle brothers, not because it was easy, but because I wanted to establish my first initial loyal fan base. You see, there's very little mutant-type representation in mainstream media. Well, unless you count Godzilla, Godzilla. But he's Godzilla, and this meant that those with quirks that transformed their bodies beyond their control had very few stories that showed them in a heroic light. Whenever they did appear, they were often shown as enemies or major villains. But imagine their shock when a new story of 4 mutant brothers fighting for justice as heroes came out of nowhere to shake up the manga world. It was no surprise that my manga was an overnight success with around 40% of the population. People couldn't get enough of my story, and the buzz on the internet was explosive. There were theories, fan art, and even some fan fiction. The huge sales of my first volume made my bank account swell. Add in the great numbers The Hunger Games is doing in sales worldwide, and things are looking very promising for my future. Still, THG got off to a rocky start that had me and my editor sweating for a while. The book didn't sell that well at first, but once I released my TMNT manga a week after the book was released, my fans couldn't help but buy the book as well because they wanted to see what other stories Gege-sensei could tell, thus increasing the book sales numbers. The book had become so popular that it even made it to the New York Times bestseller list. Slowly but surely, I was building myself up as the potential new author. I couldn't wait until Harry Potter and Star Wars came out in a few months. This world wasn't ready for 2 of the greatest works of fiction to catch up to them. Ew, look at him. He's got that creepy smile again. You're not going to laugh like that again, are you? So creepy. Any happiness I felt immediately left me as 2 girls whispered and glared at me in disgust from where they sat. I frowned and brushed them off, causing them to blush in indignation. They glared at me and walked away with a puff. +5 SP. I ate the rest of my lunch and put away my bento box. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling in boredom. Man, I hate school. Fuck. No, dude, stop spamming. Get well, commoner. +5 SP. I looked at the mask-wearing Jin, or Twice, as I mashed the square button on my controller. No matter how many complex or diverse combos Ryu pulled off, Jin was somehow able to get his character, Akuma, to dodge and avoid all of my attacks. Haha. You were nothing but a fool to think you could challenge me. He just needs some training. He'll get it, he said Twice while switching personalities in the middle of the fight, all the while hitting my health with ease. Shut up, Deadpool wannabe. I'm gonna kick your ass today. The 2 of us were sitting on a couch in Jin's much cleaner and more organized apartment. A pair of controllers sat in our hands as we played the latest iteration of Street Fighter on my futuristic PlayStation 16. This was a recurring activity that the 2 of us did twice a week when we had some free time. Me from school, work, Jujutsu stuff, and Jin from his criminal antics, which mostly involved him working as a henchman for a local gang. But don't worry, he's not a bad guy. He's just trying to make ends meet. Sometimes, we would watch some movies or even walk around the city to mess with innocent civilians by playing harmless pranks on them. Like the time we put a fake spider in a guy's coffee, and he screamed like a little girl. Or when we pretended to be lost tourists and asked for directions to a place that didn't exist. We even grabbed some street food here and there and discussed the meaning of life when we saw a dried squirrel humming another squirrel. It was a refreshing and enjoyable experience for me to have a friend I could be myself with, thanks to his old age, considering I was in my early 20s when I died. So, having a brother I could make crude jokes with was great. It took a while for Jin to feel comfortable enough with me to wear his mask in my presence, but when I showed him his different personalities it didn't change my opinion of him. He became more open and relaxed. So whenever the 2 of us hung out at his house, he would wear his mask almost all the time. And let me tell you, talking to Twice was so funny. Eat shit, you idiot. Good game, my friend. Twice he reached out a hand to shake while his other hand made whiny motions. I rolled my eyes and pushed his hand away, making him hold it against his chest with a pained expression. Violence is never the answer. No, it's the solution. Amen to that. Don't agree with him. Yes, I agree with my ways. Plus 10 SP. Gah, he's a villain. Careful. I landed on my perch at the edge of the rooftop and looked down at the chaotic street to find a large man covered in jagged rocks. Even though this is a relatively busy street, this guy decided it was a good idea to start raining blows down on the street, causing everyone nearby to panic and run away in fear. Who knew things in Naruhata were as hectic as they said? Well, this is weird, I muttered as I watched the seemingly out-of-control man destroy the sidewalk, causing a cloud of dust to rise around him. What's up with this guy? Is he on a trip or something? I then looked down the road to see someone wearing an All Might hoodie with protective motorcycle gear? What is this? Clown time? I'm the man who charges into danger. The crawler. The crawler, said as he slid across the ground on all four limbs. His head snapped up at the sight of the rampaging madman, and he quickly stopped. Wait. Really? Isn't this guy? Landing at a stoplight several feet behind the crawler was a girl maybe 3 or 4 years older than me, dressed in a tight black outfit with small bat wings on the narrow side of her back. She had pink hair pulled back into twin tails while a black painted mask sat over her eyes. Hey, another one? Are these 2 new heroes or something? I looked down at the crow beside me and narrowed my eyes at him. Hey, Nanami. Didn't I tell you to look for thieves in secluded places? This is too public. I originally found the big rock human a few blocks away in a secluded area. It seems he decided to move here for some reason, Nanami said as she tilted the small round sunglasses over her small eyes. I nodded at his response and didn't ask him where he got those sunglasses to keep my fleeting sanity. I see. Gagagaga. Why you? You again. The sea crawler. I turned my attention back to the crazy rock-enhanced man and the crawler. It seemed these 2 thickets knew each other somehow. A fact the crawler took great pleasure in as he slid in and out of the larger man's attacks. Do you hear that? He called me crawler. Not crawler. Stop looking so smug. Most people wouldn't want villains to remember their names. The pink-haired exhibitionist told him. The crawler decided to take things a little more seriously as he began to carefully lead the rock man away from the populated area they were in and towards a more secluded spot. The girl in the tight black suit pulled out a phone and stood where she was as her apparent partner walked away. He's not a fighting type, then. Nanami, I said as I stood up from my spot and adjusted my black hood. I was wearing my sorcerer outfit, which consisted of a thick black jacket, a white long-sleeved shirt, and a turtleneck underneath. I also wore black jeans and sneakers while my katana hung from the loop on my left belt. Finally, Slaughter Demon was resting strapped to my back. Any news about that task I gave you and the others? I jumped from rooftop to rooftop while keeping an eye on the crawler and the so-called villain. Nanami flew behind me and shook her head. I'm afraid we still have to find those humans with those bird-like masks. I'll be sure to expand my search, even if it means I'll have to work overtime, Nanami said with a sigh. Fine, keep going like this. I'll take care of things from here. I want to see what these heroes can do. Nanami nodded and flew off into the night. Seeing the crawler and Rockman come to a stop in a parking lot, I jumped between 2 buildings and slid down one of the brick walls as claws made of my blood dug into the brick to slow my descent until I came to a complete stop on the wall. With my blood claws as anchors, I was able to stay stuck to the wall under the cover of darkness. Suck on that, Spider-Man. Blood manipulation was such a diverse and cool technique. I watched the ongoing fight in disappointment as the crawler kept sliding to avoid the Rockman's attacks. Meanwhile, the pink-haired girl with some sort of jumping quirk watched as she told the crowd to call the police. Definitely not heroes. These 2 are probably vigilantes. I muttered as Crawler continued to not fight back. Keep doing that, and you'll trip over all the holes you 2 made. I didn't have to wait long before Crawler's back foot landed in one of the craters the large Rockman made with his attacks, causing the Crawler to stumble. Seeing his chance, Rockman pulled his arm back to finally crush the Crawler. Koichi! The pink-haired girl shouted worriedly just as Crawler was about to get hit. Koichi! Did she really shout his real name out loud? I debated whether to help these 2 clowns, but a shadow moving quickly towards the parking lot made me pause. A loud metallic sound rippled through the air as a long-haired ninja wearing a triangular mask stopped Rockman's punch using only his katana. Displaying an impressive amount of skill and strength. Rockman took a step back, his face twisted in confusion, almost as if he couldn't believe his punch was blocked by a meager sword. Without wasting a second, Mask Guy swung his katana at Rockman's raised defense with aggressive slashes, covering the larger man's rock-covered body in slices and cuts. Ho, not bad. I grabbed my own katana and watched the ongoing fight with interest and some excitement. It's pretty good. It's the police. The pink-haired girl screamed as the sounds of police sirens approached their location. Hearing this, the once furious rock man ran out of the parking lot and away from the area. It didn't seem like Crawler or Masked Man were chasing him. Instead, the three decided it was more important to chat. Thanks for the help. Who are you, exactly? Koichi asked as he and his partner looked at Masked Man. The name is Stendhal. Another busybody, just like you, Stendhal said as he sheathed his katana. Once Stendhal was done posing and looking cool, he jumped up using an impressive amount of speed and jumping skill. I jumped onto the rooftops and started following Stendhal with an excited smile on my face as flowing red scale signs covered my eyes. I knew from the moment Stendhal appeared that he was not a hero. No, the guy was practically radiating negative energy. Now then, where do you think you're going? Clank. That wasn't very nice. You could have poked your eye out with that, I said as I slid my katana back into its sheath after deflecting a quick knife. Standing behind me was Rock Man, his face covered in sweat, and a worried and pained expression settled over his face. That expression quickly changed to surprise when he noticed my sudden appearance in the wide alley path he was running down. He stood still as his gaze shifted from me to his pursuer, Stendhal, who was now glaring daggers at me from the other end of the alley. Plus 10 SP. You dare stand in the way of true judgment? Stendhal said as they reached for his katana. He unsheathed his dangerously sharp weapon and pointed it at me in one swift motion. You must be this villain's partner. Very well then, I will make sure to take you both down. Villain? Listen here, Tuxedo Mask. I pointed my finger at Rock Man. I don't really care or know who this guy is. Why are you standing in my way? Stendhal hissed, his patience running out. I rolled my eyes under the darkness of my hood and then waved my hand to point at him. Thanks to you. You see, there's something I'm trying to get. And so far, all the clowns I've fought couldn't give me the push I need to get it. You, on the other hand, have some pretty impressive moves. I pulled out my katana and held it in both hands beside my head. So what I want from you is a good fight. Plus 15 SP. Enough of this farce. I'll cut you down and then move on to the one behind you. Stendhal growled and rushed towards me with incredible speed, his katana pulled back and he's ready to cut me in two. This is my chance. I have to limit myself to just my pure strength, speed, skills, and EQ. There are no curse techniques. I have to work hard to get a black flash. I also ran forward, ready to meet my opponent head on. The clash of metal echoed through the alley as Stendhal and I engaged in an intense sword fight. Our katanas clashed and sparked as we moved with incredible speed and precision. Each strike was met with a quick parry or a deft dodge, creating a mesmerizing sword dance. This guy is good. If it weren't for Yuta's sword skills and Maki's weapon specialist skills, I doubt he would have lasted this long. At some point during our fight, Rock Man had decided it was time to leave and took a break, leaving me and Stendhal alone. Stendhal's formidable skills pushed me to the limit, but I matched his every move with determination and focus. Our intense exchange of blows continued, however, Stendhal was slowly gaining ground on me. His greater size and strength were giving him the upper hand. It was only thanks to my CE and natural strength that I was able to fight back. You are an expert. I'll give you that, Stendhal said as he deflected my horizontal strike. But I'm stronger. Plus 25 SP. In a move that took me by surprise, Stendhal closed the distance between us and kicked me in the stomach with his foot. He growled at me as I slid backwards on the ground, only to look up at the descending blade of his katana above my head. Moving on instinct, I raised my weapon above my head and deflected his attack, causing me to lose my balance momentarily. Now is my chance. I let my katana fall to the ground as I prepared my CE in my right fist. Stendhal looked down at me and jumped back just as I was about to deliver a CE-enhanced punch to his stomach. Shit. As he walked away, he threw two knives at me with precision and speed. I raised my right arm and used it to stop the knives from stabbing me in the torso. With a gesture, I ripped them away and threw the knives to the ground. What a fool. You have abandoned your weapon in hopes of striking me with your fist. Perhaps you are not as skilled as I originally thought, Stendhal said as he leaned forward. Now then, it is time for evil to be cut off. Plus 15 SP. Stendhal, with his sharp katana, moved towards me with incredible speed, aiming to take me down while I was unarmed. I watched him as I dodged and parried his deadly blows nonstop with calculated and graceful movements. It was taking everything I had to not be cut or skewered with every attack Stendhal executed. Despite my best efforts, Stendhal's formidable skills were rapidly pushing me to my limits. I was getting tired, and my speed was beginning to drop. Stendhal noticed this and took advantage of my drop in speed. He slid his left foot out and stepped on my foot, causing me to stumble. Sliding his sword diagonally, Stendhal finally managed to land a cut on my body. Seeing my blood, Stendhal smiled beneath his mask and pivoted on his hips to cut off my head. His foot was still pressing down on me alone, holding me in place with his greater strength. Shit. Dodge. There's no time or space to dodge. Time seemed to slow down as I watched Stendhal's sharp sword come closer and closer to my neck. I clenched my hands into fists as I looked at the man in front of me and carried CE in my fists. I'm not going to lose to you. I refuse to lose. It was at that moment that I finally felt it. Black. Just as Stendhal's blade was a millimeter away from my neck, I landed a punch directly on Stendhal's face while applying my cursed energy in 0.000001 seconds. Causing a distortion in the space around Stendhal and I as arcs of red and black came to life. Flash. Stendhal's mask shattered upon impact as his body flew several feet backward in a violent spin. I cringed as a long, shallow, bleeding cut now adorned the side of my neck. Despite the pain, I felt my mind clearer than ever. Plus 100 SP. I understand now, I muttered as I looked down at my hands. I clenched them tightly and looked at Stendhal. An aura of CE rapidly grew around my body. It's just like Toto said, all this time, I've been using CE without really understanding it, like a novice chef using ingredients without any purpose. But now, it's very clear to me. Stand up, Stendhal. Let me show you what 120% of my potential really looks like, I said as Stendhal finally managed to stand up. His face was bleeding profusely and his nose was broken. Plus 50 SP. Your conviction is unshakable, Stendhal muttered as he held his bloodied face in his hand. He swayed where he stood as his knees trembled. He then raised his hand to reveal a bloody knife. But this fight ends here. I watched in confusion as he brought the knife to his mouth. In an instant, my eyes widened in realization. No way, A long tongue slipped out of his mouth and gave the damn knife a long lick. Fuck. I felt all control of my body leave me as I collapsed to the ground, causing my hood to fall off my head. I tried to move, but all my body did was shake from the effort. Despite that, I turned my head to look at the man who would one day be Stain. Why you bastard? What the hell? What is Stain doing here dressed like that? Did I miss his backstory or something? Stendhal fell to his knees as he looked at me with a shocked expression before it turned into a wide, bloodthirsty grin. You have potential, child. That is why I will not extinguish your light today. Our fight has taught me many things. I am sure we will meet in the future to finish today's battle. Farewell. Plus 100 SP. I watched helplessly as Stendhal turned and walked slowly away until he disappeared into the darkness. I continued to try to move my body, but found the task impossible. Flowing red scale. With my technique active, I slowly pulled the hood over my head and began to push my body upward. As I moved, it felt as if each of my limbs were strapped to 500-pound weights, making the normally easy task of standing a Herculean task. Damn. Now I have to wait for his peculiar effect to wear off. Just great. Alright, everyone. Here are the results of the romance poll. This should go without saying, but you can't vote more than once. So repeat or spam votes don't count. You know who I'm talking about. Harem, 36. Single route, 50. And so, the one route has won over the harem route. Another thing that surprised me was how much love people have for Hatsume, the crazy otaku inventor. Her name came up 31 times for her to be the main love interest, making her the winner. In second place with 8 votes was Hatone Hire. Although she won't be my focus, I will be giving her some attention as well. However, I want to point out that the romantic aspect of the story will take a backseat. I'm sorry if that disappoints some of you, but I'd rather focus on the plot and the fights. You have obtained Itadori Yuji's pain tolerance. Rank, Silver. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not. I watched as the small plastic prize ball in my hand slowly glowed once I received my reward. In an instant, the slight pain in my neck, which was still healing, had become much more bearable. With enough concentration, I pushed the pain to the back of my mind as if I wasn't even hurt at all. Even so, the injury still stung. I sat in my small room, loose papers and art supplies strewn about, while 2 laptops sat on my desk. Unlike usual, there were no clones slaving away today. The reason was the large pile of manuscripts and a year's worth of weekly chapters sitting in various folders on a cluttered desk. It's safe to say that he was way ahead. I was even in the process of negotiating to sell the first tickets for both Harry Potter and Star Wars. It wouldn't be long before my name exploded into this world, well, at least my pseudonym. Use 700 SP, I said as I twisted the gacha dial. After a few seconds, a new prize ball came out of the machine. I hated to admit it, but I was now completely addicted to gambling my points. Hopefully, my new addition stayed in this gacha machine and not in the blood-sucking casinos this world has to offer. Sometimes it killed me not to go all out, but I knew I had to be careful with my points. Otherwise, I would just keep bringing out more useless junk from JJK's world. It got to the point where I had to rent an entire storage unit to store all my useless junk. I already had 10 pairs of Gojo sunglasses. I didn't need any more. Even if they were from a designer brand. You have drawn the curse of inventory. Rank, silver. What are you saying? I watched in curiosity as the cursed energy began to gather in the space in front of me from seemingly nowhere. After a few seconds, a purple worm-like creature appeared in the air. Before it could fall to the ground, I caught it in my arms. So I can gain cursed spirits too? Great. Does that mean I can pull Rika too? I said as the worm-like cursed spirit looked at me with a dumb expression. Now then, are you loyal to me or what? The cursed spirit nodded as if it understood me completely. I smiled and lifted it close to my body so it could wrap around my torso like it did with Toji. Awesome. I'm going to call you Zyko. Yeah. I moved my head away from Zyko with a smile, causing the spirit to hum. Zyko it is. I walked over and reached under my bed to grab my only two weapons, Kusakabe's katana and the slaughter demon. I raised them to Zyko's mouth and watched in fascination as she swallowed them both easily, making them both seemingly disappear. I then reached into her mouth and pulled out Slaughter Demon. Now I can always walk around with my weapons. How convenient. You wouldn't have Toji's arsenal now, would you? I asked Zyko. The spirit looked confused and shook its head. You don't know who Toji is? I wonder if this gacha system wipes your memories when it brought you here. This only begs the question of whether you were the spirit of Toji or Geto that I snatched or if you're an exact copy made by the system itself. Before I could think any deeper about the possible mechanics of my gacha system, my phone alarm went off. I walked over to my desk and hit the snooze button on my phone. Today was the day I would finally meet my editor for my TMNT manga. She had been pestering me and repeatedly asking for an in-person meeting after the sudden rise in popularity of my story. Apparently, communication via email and text messages was not good enough for her. Wasting no time, I quickly used my remaining 5 pulls. Sadly, I didn't earn any more decent rewards, just a bunch of more useless junk like Miwa's black tie and Miguel's funny hat. Let's move on, Zyko, I said, leaving my room to start walking down the halls of the orphanage. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a pair of round sunglasses to place over my eyes. Hopefully this won't take too long. Overview. The aroma of freshly ground coffee beans filled the air as Mikami Asuka, a red-haired woman with blue eyes dressed in a yellow jacket and black khaki pants, sat at a cozy corner table in the bustling cafe. She watched as the barista expertly steamed the milk for her latte, creating a mesmerizing swirl in the cup. The soft chatter of other customers provided soothing background noise, and the warm glow of the afternoon sun streamed through the large windows, casting a golden hue over the entire space. Asuka took a moment to savor the tranquility of the cafe, which was a welcome break from her usual hectic days. She took a sip of her latte. The rich, velvety flavor danced across her taste buds, bringing a satisfied smile to her face. Asuka had been working in the manga industry for the past 2 years, so her experience in the field was somewhat lacking. Despite that, she was hungry and desperate to secure her place at the top of the industry. This meant that she had to find the next big story to shake up the manga world. That was easier said than done. Even after a year of searching and interviewing various hopeful future mangakas, Asuka came up empty-handed. All the stories and one-shots she's seen were generic and boring. There was nothing new and fresh. Nothing that would catch the reader's attention. That was until he received an email from someone named Gege. This was not unusual by any means. Asuka's email constantly received messages from aspiring artists who wanted her to take a chance on them and their works. But the message she received from Gege was different. His message was short and to the point. Read this and let me know when we can start. Gigi's message was one of extreme confidence. Some wouldn't be remiss to even say a little selfish. But when Asuka took a look at the attachments, she couldn't help but be unimpressed with the quality of the art. The drawings were decent, but nothing impressive. But they didn't have to be. No, what stood out like a star in the sky was the story. The story of 4 mutant ninja brothers who fight evil and protect the innocent from the shadows as unsung heroes caught the attention. It was also the same story that he's been looking for all along. Asuka wasn't like most people. Most people wanted to see larger-than-life heroes performing great heroic deeds while looking handsome, beautiful, and human. It wasn't much of a secret that the media didn't like to show those with mutant-type quirks. No, heroes like Gang Orca, Wolfman, Super Snake Woman, and many more pro-mutant heroes weren't exactly pushed to be on the covers or in prime time slots on television or in movies. Even today, people still can't differentiate between those who look different and monsters or villains. However, a story like the Turtle Brothers could be the push to help society change. Even if it's just a small push. So Asuka instantly agreed to meet Gege and submit her story to Jump. The bigwigs in charge almost didn't agree to direct the story, but Asuka wasn't one to give up that easily. She pushed and pushed the bigwigs until they agreed to give the story a chance. And to everyone's surprise except her, Gigi's story was an instant hit. Readers couldn't get enough of the stories of the 4 Ninja Turtle brothers and their rat father. Week after week, every issue of Jump had massive sales, largely due to Gigi's story. You can also imagine her surprise when she discovered that Gege was also a writer. He wrote the recently awarded New York Times bestseller, The Hunger Games. Asuka had asked to meet Gege on several occasions, but the mangaka was adamant about keeping their communication via the internet or phone. But after working alongside him for several weeks, Asuka no longer took no for an answer. Well, then we can meet at this cafe in Musetafu. That's how Asuka ended up in a lovely cafe in Musetafu City. Her face was eager and impatient to meet the man who did so much in such a short time. Glancing over, Asuka noticed a group of young teenagers engaged in lively conversation at a nearby table, their laughter adding a cheerful energy to the atmosphere. The aroma of freshly baked pastries drifted out from the display case, tempting her with their decadent sweetness. It's almost time. Where is he? Asuka asked as she took another sip of her drink. Lost in her thoughts, Asuka didn't notice a black-haired young man dressed in a black hoodie and white shirt as he looked down at his phone and then back at her repeatedly. With a shrug, he walked over and sat down on the chair across from her nonchalantly. Noticing the weird kid sitting in front of her, Asuka raised an eyebrow at him in annoyance. Hey, kid, did you get lost or something? Listen, I don't have time for you. Can you bother someone else? Boy? Ma'am, I'm 12 years old. So, a kid, Asuka said with a sigh. She then made shushu motions at her uninvited guest with her eyes rolled back. Do you want some money or something? Here's 500 yen, now go. The young man wearing sunglasses took the bill with a shrug and put it in his pocket. Still, he didn't move and looked at Asuka with a slight smile. The red-haired woman slowly began to feel a strange feeling from the boy in front of her. Almost negative. This caused Asuka to slowly slide back into her chair. Her reaction made the black-haired boy's smile spread further in amusement. Ah. I have to go now. Asuka muttered as she began to gather her things to leave the table. Really? The young man said in an amused tone. I thought you wanted to meet me, Mikami-san. In an instant, Asuka froze and turned to him with eyes that slowly widened. Gege. S-sensei? In the flesh. A few moments later, a long, muffled, high-pitched filled the cafe. The city of Musetafu was a special city. It was your average city located in Shizuoka Prefecture. About 2 hours by train from the orphanage where I live. However, there were several key locations with potential points waiting to be claimed from Musetafu. Places like Midoriya's apartment, Takoba Municipal Beach Park, Taduin Station, Todoroki's house, Aldera Junior High, and finally, UA High School. But I wasn't here for any of those locations today. No, I was here to visit my old orphan and friend. Hayes Keiko. This must be it. I looked from my phone's GPS to the impressive 2-story house. A bag of fancy cookies in my right hand. Not bad. Zyko growled from his spot on my shoulder as he also looked over the house. My fun meeting with my editor, fortunately, only lasted 2 hours. Asuka was a pretty fun person to mess with. As expected, my young age had thrown her for a loop. While watching her stutter and apologize for being rude was hilarious, she quickly recovered and we both got down to business. She had tried to sneak in some story beats and suggestions for my story, like every manga editor tries to do, but I quickly shut that shit down and told her what my plans were for my story. Asuka was shocked that I only had so many chapters in mind for the duration of my story and that I didn't want it to run for years. Asuka immediately tried to talk me out of this due to the sheer popularity of my story. However, when I mentioned that I had another story planned once TMNT was finished, she quickly changed her tune and peppered me with questions. This version of Japan wasn't ready for Dragon Ball Z to fall. This one's for you, Toriyama. Your legend will live on in this uncultured world. What do we have here? I stepped forward and read the nameplate by the house's door. Yoshiyuki, he read. I walked over and pressed the doorbell on the stone pillar of the house's door and waited. As I waited, I glanced over at the house next door, where a black crow was perched on its roof. I nodded to Megumi, causing her to nod. From my calls over the years with Keiko, she had told me that her new family was apparently super wonderful and friendly. They had been very supportive and loving towards her. I was happy for her. I really was. She was a sweet girl who had been through hell very early on. She deserves some happiness. It wasn't until recently that he insisted I come meet his family. Something I had been putting off for as long as I could. Not because I didn't want to. Of course not. No, it was because of how busy I've been lately and my late-night escapades. But Keiko had finally had enough and ordered me to come today. Stubborn woman, and, girl. Su-chan. Keiko ran out her front door and opened the front door of her house to jump into my arms. She had a huge smile on her face as she tried to squeeze the life out of my body. You're here. You're finally here. You've grown taller. +5 SP. Calm down, Keiko, I said with a small smile, making her laugh. You'll crush my present. The excitable blue-haired girl jumped back and looked down at the blue bag in my hand. She then grabbed my other hand and dragged me towards her house. I can't wait for you to meet my new mom and dad. I'm sure you'll love them. They're so nice, and they even let me decorate my own room the way I like. Oh. I want to show you my room. Easy there, girl, I said as I stroked the top of her head in an attempt to calm her high energy levels, just like I did during our time at the orphanage. Let me meet your new friends first. Ah, he. Sorry. I'm so happy to see you again, Keiko said softly as we stopped at the front door. Her yellow eyes looked at me fondly. I missed you. +5 SP. I stood still and looked at her in bewildered silence. A soft, warm feeling grew around my chest. What I felt wasn't romantic. No, this feeling was something else. It was hard to describe. It was nice. Also why? Keiko-chan. Is this the young man you've been talking about nonstop? My eyebrow twitched in annoyance, and I turned to look at a middle-aged couple standing by the door. The man had well-combed brown hair with a slight build. He was dressed in casual clothes very suitable for being at home. The woman beside him had black hair tied back in a low ponytail. She was wearing a pink blouse and a long yellow skirt hanging on her legs. The couple looked away from their daughter and flinched as their eyes met mine. They seemed to be able to quickly pick up on the negative energy I was putting out. It usually took most people a few minutes of being around me to notice. You must be, Soda. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, young man. Keiko here has had nothing but wonderful things to say about you. Keiko's new mother said with a smile, seemingly overcoming any of the feelings she had for me. My name is Yoshiyuki Hana. And this is my husband, Yoshiyuki Kenta. It's a pleasure to meet you both, I said with a slight nod. It wouldn't do me any good to be disrespectful to my friend's parents. +5 SP. Wow, I've never seen you bow to anyone, Su-chan. How strange. I can be respectful. I just choose not to. You've grown a lot, Su-chan. I'm very proud. You know I'm older than you, right? The Yoshiyuki couple laughed at our conversations. I, on the other hand, took the side. It seems Keiko has become quite bold since she left. I missed the little girl who hid behind me whenever we had people over. Her newfound confidence was surprising and amusing. Now then, why don't you two kids come inside? We wouldn't want the snacks Keiko worked so hard to prepare to go to waste, now? Mother. Don't say that to Su-chan. +10 SP. Keiko's room was a cheerful and welcoming space. It perfectly reflected her vibrant and bubbly personality. After talking and getting to know Keiko's parents for about 40 minutes, I came to the conclusion that the Yoshiyuki couple were good people. Unlike most people I meet, they barely had any traces of negative emotions. Something I was able to pick up on quite easily, thanks to my skills as a sorcerer. The two of them genuinely loved and cared for my friend. A fact that reassured me. Even so, I would still have Megumi watching over her. Just to be safe. Once the Yoshiyuki couple were satisfied after asking me a multitude of questions about myself, they let Keiko and I go up to their room at their request. The walls were painted in a soft sky blue hue and adorned with colorful posters of her favorite anime characters and bands. A large bookshelf sat against one wall, filled with various children's books and knickknacks. A comfortable bed with a bright floral bedspread sat in one corner, accompanied by an All Might stuffed toy. The room was lit by fairy lights strung across the ceiling, casting a warm, welcoming glow. A small desk, filled with art supplies and sketches, occupied another corner. Sitting on a chair was the All Might themed sweater she had received all those years ago. Overall, the room exuded a sense of joy and individuality, perfectly capturing who Keiko was. "You must have gone crazy decorating your room," I said as I approached his desk, where there were several sketches. They were rough drawings of heroine outfits. Each of them had detailed notes of what each item of the costume did or what it was made of. Looking at them made my amused smile melt. With her back to her, Keiko nodded happily and threw herself onto her bed. +5 SP. Yes. Isn't it wonderful? I have it all to myself, and I don't have to share it. Keiko froze in her excited chatter and turned to me with a sad, pitiful expression. "I'm sorry, Su-chan. I didn't. +5 SP. It's okay." I interrupted her as I sat down on her bed to lay down next to her. "I don't need any parents anyway. I'm incredibly self-sufficient, didn't you know that?" "I know. But still. I feel like I'm showing off when I show my parents' room." "Ouch. Why did you hit me with my own pillow?" "Because you're being stupid," I said as I turned to her with a smile. "I'm glad you're happy. So don't worry about little old me. I'm fine. +10 SP. Keiko remained silent and brushed her fingers against the bandage on my neck. "What is this then? Are you still getting into fights?" "No?" I sat down and looked at her desk, where all of her hero costume sketches were. "I see you still want to be a hero," I said to change the subject. Keiko quickly sat down and covered my eyes with her hands. "I thought I told you it was a bad idea." "No, don't look. I'm still working on them," Keiko said with an embarrassed blush as I laughed. "And of course, I still want to be a hero. After all, I want to be like All Might. I want to save people from danger with a smile like he did when he saved me." I grabbed his hands and took them off my face with a sigh. Standing up, I walked over to his desk and put a hand on his hoodie. Being a heroine was something she always talked about when she was still living with me at the orphanage. Then again, that's pretty much what all kids talk about when they're young and full of dreams. However, unlike most children with weak and lame abilities, Keiko's quirk actually had some potential. Her quirk was called Loving Shield. Loving Shield allowed her to summon barriers or walls of blue energy capable of stopping/blocking anything as strong as her. What drives her quirk is her abnormally high levels of positive emotions. However, if her happy emotional state is disrupted or shaken, her energy barriers will weaken or break. Right now, his quirk is quite weak due to his young age and inexperience, but with enough time, I knew that his ability had the potential to grow to be quite powerful. "You think? I can't do it?" Keiko asked timidly, her hands on her knees as she looked down at her pink carpet. Her usually bright and cheerful yellow eyes were now darker. Once again I found myself sighing and brushing my hair. "It's not that. You know how I feel about heroes. It's a dangerous profession, Keiko. +5 SP. I know that. But I know I can do it," Keiko said with a smile, her previous shyness gone as if it had never been there. She then clapped her hands like a certain blonde alchemist and raised her palms to me. I watched as a blue energy barrier half her size burst into life in front of her. "See? I've been working so hard on my quirk. Try to overcome it like before." "That's right. This is much bigger and more solid than before." I walked over and put a hand on the barrier. Touching it didn't hurt or burn me, the only thing I felt when I touched it was a nice, cool sensation. Slowly, I started pushing the barrier with my natural strength. The barrier didn't budge. Then I tried again with my CE and saw that the barrier started to shake. Seeing that, I stopped pushing. Not bad. Last time I did this, my hand was able to push it away like it was made of jelly. +5 SP. Hee hee. Keiko smiled and released her barrier in favor of placing her hands on her hips. "Look. I've gotten a lot stronger. I'll definitely be a great hero someday." Images of destruction and mutant humanoid creatures came to mind. A light blue-haired man with the power to crumble anything he touched stood behind Keiko and slowly began to reach her face, ready to break her down into dust. In a few years, Keiko will probably be in the same year as Midoriya when he joins UA. If he does, will he be placed in 1A? No, I doubt it. At most, He'll probably make it to a general education class like Shinso. As long as he stays away from class 1A, then he won't be at the center of it all. She'll be fine. She wanted to tell her to give up. To give up on her dream of being a heroine. It would only kill her. She wasn't part of the main cast, and that meant she didn't have any plot armor like the rest of class 1A. Keiko could very well die as one of the background characters. But if I told her to give up now, would that be fair to her? Was I really going to risk our relationship based on my paranoid what if?